Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Seibert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
So welcome to Relationships Inside Out, where today we're going to talk about happiness.
Happiness. It's one.
What the hell is that?
One that we think everyone would define the same, but actually it can look quite different by person.
Yeah. And at least in American culture, the big misconception is money buys happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Material things buy happiness, which
we know that's a
true.
misconception because even the wealthiest have mental health struggles,
Yeah.
have personal struggles, have psychotic breaks, have all the things that the non-wealthy have. Now, that's not to say that a lack of money doesn't impact happiness, right? So if we identify as poor and are struggling to get housing, yes, your happiness is probably going to be impacted.
Yeah. And that's why when you see in the research relationship and the relationship between money and happiness have a positive correlation. So as money goes up, happiness goes up to a certain point, and then it tapers off or flattens. It's not to say that more money can't bring you happiness, but the increments are so small compared to like the effort you have to put through for that. So, you're at a certain point, you no longer have material deprivation that you're struggling with, what you're talking about being in poverty. So you're out of that and you're able to afford things. But an exorbitant amount of money doesn't buy you any more, much more happiness than if you were to have, I think right now around like 80,000 a year is kind of where that kind of flattens out for people.
And mindset is huge, whether it's money or travel or what we have in our home. Mindset is huge.
Yeah.
Do I value what I have, or am I always chasing the next thing?
Yeah.
The next shiny object, the next home, or can I be content? That's not meaning you can't strive for something more.
Yeah.
But can I enjoy where I'm at the same time? Can I enjoy that journey? Or do I always feel like I'm in a place of scarcity or deprivation?
Yeah. Can remove that stress. And you may already be that stress. You may be in a place of a lot of stress anyways, even if you make a lot of money. Another thing, I guess, to say is that you could make a ton of money, like say millions. You can buy happiness with that money in the sense of if you use your money or how you use that money is important. So with those jobs that make a lot of money, you're probably working long hours. So one big one is buy yourself time. So when they clean the house, buy it for experiences, things like that can bring the happiness and use it for that. It can help in that regard. But traditionally, and I think it starts early on in school, like how are we rewarded? Gold stars, grades, everything external to us, material things. And so we learn from a very early age that, these things outside of myself, and I can show everyone I got a gold star. I show everyone I got an A.
That comparison. Yeah.
And it feels good in the moment. And you might feel like you buy a car, right? You're happy, a new car. 6 months down the road to a year, it's just a car.
Off. Right.
It's worn off. And that's kind of like this hedonistic adaptation or treadmill, they call it. And it's this idea that our baseline or like our happiness resets to baseline. It kind of goes back, right?
So how would you, Greg, just you as a person, how would you define your happiness?
I don't know how I define it, but I know what I'm looking for to help fulfill that and to feel happy. And one of those, and this shows in the research too, is meaningful relationships where you feel connection and value. Humans need connection, right? Whether you want to conceptualize that as a basic need to be part of a tribe for survival or what, but that basic connection is so important, and meaningful connection are big ones. Another one is in being very intentional about living out my life in accordance with my values.
Ooh, big one. And
like, let's take work, for example. There's individuals who work for the money to go live a life, but there's people who really identify with what they do. And those tend to feel more happy, experience more happiness in that regard, because they're living in accordance with their values. They're not using it for a means for like money to go necessarily do things, which they get both, right? They're working in something that they're passionate about, and they can.
So it's enjoying the work while you're in that process.
Yeah.
Not just drudging through it so then I can go do something fun or enjoyable.
Yeah. And it might work for other people, right? This isn't like a.
And that's what I say for you, Greg, like you as an individual person.
Yeah. But even as we talk about these concepts and misconceptions, it might not apply to everyone. There might be these unique outliers who are like, money really makes me ecstatic for whatever reason. I mean, maybe. So yeah, and when you look at the research, money as a predictor of happiness, it's kind of on the lower rungs of predictors. I mean, you talk about gratitude, living with your values, meaningful relationships, but actually practicing compassion. because intentional about compassion for other people gives you a sense of purpose,
and
you feel good. The research shows that you actually benefit from being compassionate as well. So how about for you? Like, what are some things you do to try to build on that happiness in your life?
Happiness for me, because I felt, how do I say this? In my life, I felt a lot of trauma. And so I felt really unhappy. And so happiness for me is a feeling of stability. It's a feeling of mutuality in those relationships. So not just having connections, but feeling like we both are invested in that connection or that relationship. We're both putting energy in is a big piece of my happiness. But also we talk about happiness. Even then I'm like, well, how much is the other person giving me? But it's also what I give them and stuff that has nothing to do with anybody or anything else. So do I feel good about the work I'm providing to clients? Do I feel good about my self-care? And that's a big piece of my happiness is, can I be aware of what my body's needing and attune to it and honor it? Or am I trying to muscle through not getting them met? So that's a big piece for me. My faith is a big one. It has gotten me through some tough periods. And my happiness often grounds in my relationship with God, right? As I see it. And with my kids' relationship with God. But again, so different than what even my husband would say or a parent would say. We each have a different idea of what happiness looks like.
And I think in general, asking yourself, what is it that makes me happy? And try to stay away from the materialistic things, the money things. Like everyone's like, if I just get a new house, this new house will make me happy. That house is a shell. Those relationships inside can really change the memories of what that house means for you. And that's why I look at it as like a stronger predictor, because then that house could have bad connotation if you just remember all these family fights. So try to find something that, like we're talking about, that has value. That even
travel though, right? Like some people might look at travel as frivolous or money centric. For our family, I take a week off every quarter. That's for my mental health. But we take a trip at least 2 to 3 times a year, some local, some in the States, and then one international. And I don't do that as like a money driven thing, but as I love seeing other cultures,
experience,
getting out of my 4 walls, my kids, watching the joy and wonder and exploration through them. There is no greater joy to me than my kids' happiness, which as a therapist, basing my happiness on someone else's.
Let's talk about this codependency. We had an episode on that.
Shaky ground.
We had an episode on codependency. Should we go back?
Golly. But travel for us is a big one. Where we can relax, where someone else cooks the meals, where our kids can just play, right? Where we can play. So things like that can also be really impactful. That do require money. It's not lost on me that it requires money. But finding travel even within our state or that's close or a staycation.
I literally was yesterday, part of my self-care, going hiking, and I went hiking along the river, and there's this like kind of offshoot. And there was a family there just using that as their local like pool and having fun with the kids. And they weren't local. I talked to them, and that's free. Right. The gas probably not to get there wasn't, but they're still in Colorado, but not local to Fort Collins. But it was just using those experiences and finding how we can have the get out and be present. So mindfulness is another predictor of happiness. In the sense of being present and looking at our emotions or whatever we're experiencing without judgment is the big one, to help kind of diffuse the kind of potency of them. So we can reduce some of the anxiety and anything else that we're feeling that might take away from being present. Bless you. You're allergic to happiness. Got it.
Ooh, golly. Struggle's real.
But mindfulness is interesting because it's interesting as a concept of helping with happiness. But it does help promote positive feelings when you are present and you can sit with emotions to diffuse them, right? Because you're kind of desensitizing yourself to them by sitting with them without judgment, and that can help.
And when we get to be present, we may notice things within our body, within our mind that we didn't notice before, right? If I'm always anxious or future focused or whatever it might be, I don't get a chance to pause and say, maybe my back hurts, or you know what I need is some sleep. Or when was the last time I ate? Right. So if we get that time to slow down and do a body check, that can have profound impacts on our happiness. Because our subconscious is aware of all of the irritants in our body, our lack of nutrition, our pain. And if we're not attuning to them in our conscious mind, it's just going to continue to irritate our nervous system, irritate our brain. If we get a chance to slow down and check in with those, we can actually do something about it.
Yeah. And I think what we're talking about too is things that are more for long-term happiness.
Sure.
Because there's some of the things we think of that are on the short term, they just don't last as long and maybe aren't the best for us. I think about snacking, right? You eat food and releases endorphins. Like, I just need to be happy. Or retail therapy. You buy that new set of shoes, like, oh, that's great. I feel happy. It wears off. And then what? Right? Like, how much stuff are you going to buy to fill this void? And what are things we can do to practice feeling happy? Outside of these material things that I personally believe that we're conditioned from a young age to feel and look for. So,
and what is happiness? Again, back to that question of like, what does it look like for you? Some people might define it as like this overabundance of joy and laughing and that kind of happiness. Some other people, like myself, I'm not very emotive, as weird as that sounds as a therapist. Happiness for me is feeling content. It's feeling calm in my body. It is, some of the joy, but it's not this like euphoria or intensity that other people might have. And so for me, if I'm always seeking euphoria, I'm going to come up short every day. Yeah. But if I know for my body, happiness is feeling calm, feeling connected, smiling when I see my kids. It lets me know, okay, like I am feeling happy. I'm feeling joy in my way.
Yeah. And important in this conversation is thinking of the times that we're not always going to be smiling at our kids. We're not always going to be euphoric. And this goes back to a previous episode. We talked about perfection. You're not always going to feel happy.
Oh, I wish we did.
Right. Though. But there are parts of us that we can help reinforce through the compassion, practicing compassion or gratitude, which is a really good one. It's like one of the top predictors of happiness. And you can do something like the 5-minute gratitude journal a day. And I'll leave a link to that on the podcast, but it's very simple. 3 things in the morning that you ask yourself and go through, and 2 things at the end of the day. Very simple, but that continual practice of that, to me, it shifts your perspective. We talked about this in the previous episode, shifts your perspective to focus on what do I have? I could have went hiking yesterday and had my mind thinking about all the work I had, or I can be like, wow, it smells like spring. Look at the fish jumping. Look at the dogs playing in there, the kids playing in that little offshoot. I mean, being present and just being grateful for the opportunity to even walk and do that with my dog and watch her be happy. And so, yeah.
Because it can be tempting to get sucked into like our phone, news, media, friends, and get drudged into what is going wrong. You will always find something that's going wrong, right? But if we can pause and really shift that mindset to, but what's going well? Yeah. What do I feel good about? At minimum, what do I feel content about? Yeah. Right? It doesn't have to be big. It can be, I'm glad I got a shower today. Yeah. Or it can be, I'm glad someone reached out to me. I'm glad I could offer support to another.
I'm grateful that I was able to afford a cup of coffee today, or I'm grateful that I smoked 2 less cigarettes today. I mean, I look at it like, just as there's parts of us and there's parts of us that are, that we want to work on. There's parts of us that are great, and trying to see all of us and that are not just the negative thing being all consuming. Same thing with our lives and happiness, right? What is going well, and focus on the different parts of our lives that we can appreciate and be grateful for, because there's definitely some parts that are not.
Lord knows I get it.
Which are easier to find, right? We want to fix those because they're uncomfortable. And that's another thing with the happiness is being flexible. So being curious, but being flexible with the uncomfortable emotions. That's key, because if we're not flexible with those emotions, they're consuming.
Yeah. And our brain is wired to focus on the negative. It's threat management, right? It's keeping us alive. It's not wired to focus on the positive. So we have to be active in that process. We have to actively choose happiness, gratitude. Otherwise, our brain will take over, which is geared for the negative, geared for the hurt, the pain, the fears, the anxiety. It isn't geared to be content, because content to our brain feels like we're going to miss a threat, right? Or it feels like we're complacent.
Yeah, survival.
So letting yourself feel that and really working on that, even if you don't feel like being joyful, the gratitude is a great one, because we fill it out anyway. We fill out the gratitude journal anyway. Right? Even if we're having a tough day, still finding those points of gratitude can really help rewire our brain. Yeah.
And similar to what you talked about in previous episodes is what's going well in the relationship, and not just focus on the problem saturation. The pursuit of happiness is a long journey. It's a lifelong journey. This isn't something that you're going to like, I won the lottery, I'm going to be happy. Matter of fact, research shows that some of their baseline or the happiness goes back to baseline in a couple of years. So it is a lifelong journey. And what you find as being a predictor of your happiness today might be different in 6 months or a year. And it can look different, but always seeking that and making sure, like, that's why I like the value thing. I'm living with my values. It brings me some of that contentment of, like, I know I'm living to this comfort level that I have, and I'm doing what I believe in to my best ability.
We have to have some of those lows in order to appreciate the highs. But if we were always, quote unquote, joyful, if we don't have that variability, it's actually hard for the brain to distinguish that this is joy, because it just feels flat or numb at that point.
Yeah, I remember, so I was living in San Diego at the time, and I love the weather, right? I probably have undiagnosed seasonal affective disorder, but I loved it. And we ended up moving to Colorado, and I was a little bummed because, like, conceptually I appreciate the seasons, but when winter comes, it's just brutal for me. And somebody said to me, yeah, well, when you're in Colorado, and they said for themselves, when they were in the mountains, they said the thing we loved about it the most was that winter allowed us to appreciate the spring much more. Oh. And when you're in San Diego, like, every day is nice. So people are like, we'll go out whenever. But when it's nice here, people rush to go out, and they make it intentional, right?
Interesting.
And there's some interesting articles, and I'll have to find it so I can post it as a resource, but it talked about seasonal affective disorder and specifically. And it said, you could go to these sunshine states, right? You could. But there's other factors that compound this bucket of kind of being happy. And so you go there, but now you got increased cost of living, the taxes in that, or the political climate in there that might take away from that bucket. Or you can find ways to, here's part of this happiness of experience, is find experience or things that bring you joy in these gray times of, like, winter, and live through that to get this increased surge of happiness when spring comes, like these endorphins, right? Like, oh, wow, it's spring. Whereas if you live in these other places, that kind of what we talked about earlier, hedonistic adaptation, it's just kind of, we're so used to it, it doesn't bring me happiness anymore because it's nice every day. But then again, you come like Colorado or a place with the seasons, you appreciate it more, whether unconsciously or not. So.
I love that. The perspective, right, of appreciating spring. I've never thought of it that way. And I love it.
Yeah.
Right. And how can we appreciate other things in the same regard? Like, it might suck right now. Things might be really painful for you right now. How can we move through that? How can we anticipate joy going forward? How can we appreciate the journey that we're in right now?
Yeah.
Again, with that perfectionism, right? Appreciating the journey, not just the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough one. And importantly, and I've had a lot of clients who feel like they don't deserve it. And you do deserve it. You're a human. You deserve happiness.
Everyone does.
And even those who are like, no, I need to take care of other people, I don't have time for that. I'm like, well, you're better at taking care of other people when you're happy. 100%. When you're in a good place, you have a better capacity, and you're doing them more of a service if that's your kind of goal for you. Like, taking care of ourselves, we deserve that. And matter of fact, I think that's more important than working sometimes.
Truth.
Like, we schedule times to go work, schedule times to go be happy, things that bring you joy. We deserve that. We do deserve that.
Because, episode wouldn't be complete without boundaries. I think about too, if you have, I call them joy stealers in your life, the people that are really negative saturated.
What are those things on Harry Potter that?
Oh my gosh.
Oh God, listeners are going to hate us.
Oh my gosh. And I love Harry Potter. I know there are people shouting right now.
Oh, I can't think of it. It's on the back of my tongue.
It'll come to me. It'll come to me. Oh, you had to say it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I want to say Death Eaters. I don't think that's right. Anyway, I digress. If you have people who are joy stealers, who don't bring you joy, who don't facilitate your joy, who are critical, you are allowed, hear me, you are allowed to take space. I don't care if it's your mama, your best friend, your neighbor, your coworker, I don't care who it is.
Your partner, and hopefully that's not the case.
You are allowed a boundary in space of, if they're constantly bringing the critical, if they're constantly bringing the negative, if they really are taking from your joy, you're allowed to either verbally say, like, when we're together, I'm going to ask that we focus on the good. And if not, I'm going to have to take space. You're welcome to somewhat pull back a little bit. I don't encourage ghosting anyone, by the way, but take that separation in space.
Yeah.
No one gets to steal your joy. We often talk about as therapists, no one controls your actions and no one controls your emotions. No one can make you feel any type of way. No one can make you do anything, right? The same is true here. Don't give people that power. Steal your power back. And if they are having a negative impact, can you brush off what they're saying? If not, take that space.
Yeah.
Set that boundary.
And I love that because it goes in the sense of, well, another top predictor of happiness is meaningful relationships. But if we have some toxic ones, they might be all consuming that we can't learn to appreciate and be present with these meaningful ones, which taken away from our happiness. So yeah, the boundaries are important. I love the plug. And the same
is true on social media, right? I've said this before, but clean up your social media. There's things on there that make you feel bad about your body, bad about your family, the political device, whatever. It doesn't matter. Clean it up, unfollow, mute, whatever it is on your platform. Because if we're constantly absorbing it, constantly seeing it, taking it in, even if we don't want to, our body is absorbing it. Yeah. And it will impact our level of happiness.
Here's one kind of that is probably, I don't know if it's unique for me, but I think is helpful for me is I literally have to evaluate my expectations going into any experience.
Yeah. Say more about that.
So I've noticed that being a perfectionist from our last
in recovery, we're working in recovery.
I have these expectations, and when I have expectations, it's saying these things should go this way. I'm shooting on myself and how life should be. Well, that's just not the reality. And it actually goes against what we just talked about earlier about being flexible. I expect something to happen. And when it doesn't happen, it takes away from the joy that I could have experienced. Instead of just saying, I'm going to go here with an open mind and be curious, right? Just be open and say, whatever happens, happens. You know, if I go fly fishing, if I catch a fish, great. If not, oh my God, I was sitting in a river in the Rocky Mountains, which is a privilege, right? Living here in Colorado. So I think the expectations are a big one. And I work with a lot of clients with expectations of how interactions should have gone.
Yep.
And
events.
When they don't, it is devastating. So checking those expectations, evaluating them, like, do I have any? Like, how do I want this to go? And am I okay with it not going this way? And I have to ask myself that. And sometimes I don't. I'm sorry to my wife, but
and having coping tools for when it doesn't. We had our daughter's party this last weekend.
I'm not coping with that. It should have just went the way it should have
gone. Oh, golly. We had her party this past weekend. And when I woke up and it was windy and cold, I was devastated. Oh. And my husband he's such a lovely human, and he's much more of an optimist. And he was like, it's okay, we're still gonna have a great time. And I'm like, no, we're not, because it's windy. And I wanted to be outside, and I wanted. And he does a great job of, and we're still gonna have good food. We're still gonna have people we love here. We're still going to.
Oh, I was here. I was there. Did you guys love us?
Most every guest. And that technique for him, like that grounding technique of, okay, that sucks. And what can we do to make the best of it? How can we still have fun? How can I acknowledge I'm disappointed and let it go?
Oh my God, that is so hard conceptually for people to understand that you can be both.
Yeah.
You know,
and statement.
Yeah. I can be frustrated with my partner and still love them.
Kidding, Chris. Totally kidding. Yeah. I can be disappointed that this part isn't working out.
Yeah.
Or this part of my vacation, or that my kid's sick. And what can I appreciate?
Yeah.
What can I find the joy, the laughter in? Right. We rescheduled this party 3 times. So there was a point of laughter where Chris and I are like, you have got to be joking. Right. And being able to find the laughter and the joy that's still laden in it.
But checking those expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like you were kind of going through the motions of what you expected and how it's not, and coping with that and trying to process through
bargaining, all the stages of grief. I bargained. I was angry, disappointed, sad.
Yeah.
Hopefully came to stage 5 of acceptance.
When the sun came out. When the sun came out.
Then I was like, oh, okay, this is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just a lot of little things. And I think part of the pursuit of happiness is exploring and just sitting down one time and multiple times, really, and just being like, okay, what have I done in my life that I really enjoyed? And what are my values, right? What am I optimistic about? What am I hopeful for? and really asking yourself important questions to really get at your underlying values and seeing if you're living them out and evaluating how do they exist and not exist in relationships or just at work and life, and making a shift if you can, if it's reasonable.
I just keep thinking about the movie, The Pursuit of Happiness or Pursuit of Happiness. Such a good movie, by the way. But again, that we have to have those struggles to feel that joy. How can we have the people around us who are loving and supportive keep us accountable? Right? If I'm in a cranky ass mood and I snap at my daughter, my husband and I have a solid enough marriage that he can come to me and say, "You okay? Hey, you were just really snappy with Harper. Maybe go repair with her."
Yeah.
Because my lack of happiness or joy has a ripple effect on the people I love.
Yep.
And having that accountability partner has me to where I can, oh, shoot, you're right. Like I didn't even notice I was in that cycle. So I can take a breath, reset my body, reset maybe the rift I created, and restart the whole day.
Yeah.
Whereas if I let the unhappiness take over, that whole day is squashed.
And going through, I mean, we've had 10 years of education in this, right, for our work. And I wouldn't say we're experts on the happiness realm. It's definitely a big part of our job. But I cringe looking back at myself as a teenager. And I was like, if you just bought me this car, I'd be so happy. If you got me these new clothes, I would be so happy. And I'm not happy because you didn't. And I was just thinking of how, I still hear clients with that
Secretly, that was last week, but that's okay.
Yeah. I've changed. But I even hear clients still with that logic and checking that logic, because there's expectations in that. I expect to get this because if I get it, then I would be happy. And that in itself is unfortunate, because sure, you will experience happiness, but not for long. So then your expectation is no longer met. And it's tough, but this is why it's a lifelong journey. And it's something we deserve. Conscious,
active, intentional work.
Has to, yeah.
For the people you look around you and you say, I just wish I could be happy like them. They work for that, right? When the lows hit, they work to find the gratitude, to find the joy, to find the happy. Happiness is work.
Flexible.
Yes.
Don't get stuck in the idea of it being permanent, which is hard. I would not say I'm the most flexible, especially after being in the military. There's not really flexibility in that.
Being a perfectionist, veteran, got some things against you, dear. I know a really good therapist.
Yeah.
Give yourself that chance to make that choice. It's hard. And there are times that no matter how much we want to choose it or will it, it may not happen. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
Happiness is something we all deserve.
You deserve this.
And by and large, have the capability of experiencing. There are, of course, mental health conditions that make it harder. But can we choose to go to therapy? Yeah. Can we choose to get medication support? Because sometimes it's biology based. It's not a therapist can solve it. It is really your brain isn't producing what it needs to.
Or even just like think about thyroidism, hyper or hypo, and there's relationship to anxiety and depression. I mean, there could be
that explains mine. Good.
There's a lot of reasons, right? So finding and exploring that, and that part of the intention is I deserve to be happy, so I'm going to go figure out what's going on
in my body.
Yeah, and it's hard, especially those I work with clients with pain. That is very, very, very hard, and that effort is a lot more. I mean, it is, but they're still deserving of happiness.
100%.
So
everyone is, even the people I don't love in life.
Yeah.
I still think that they deserve happiness. But again, it's relative. So what I would define as happiness will not be the same as my husband or my daughter, who Cocomelon is her happiness. To me, Cocomelon is the opposite. It is maddening, right?
Yeah.
And how does it change over life? What I thought happiness meant for me when I was 25 versus now versus probably when I'm 40 will look very different. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, well, I lost my train of thought there. That's not happiness. That's devastating. Just kidding.
That's okay.
Oh, you talked about relativeness. And it is true. Like, say someone experiencing pain. This is why I love the gratitude thing, because you can still find things to be grateful for in the midst of that, and to disrupt kind of that misery we're living through of this everyday constant suffering, and finding ways of like, what do I still have? People who love me, or what do I still have? Or, finding something. That's why I love the gratitude, because it does adapt to that relativeness of what that might look like. Me being that bratty adolescence who, wanted the material things.
I
don't
still
know
think
what
that was like last week, but whatever.
I don't know exactly what it was, but I remember asking for a lot of I needed to have at the time Abercrombie, or I won't be happy because I'll be bullied, or
And couples, I hear that. If you just did.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Here's the thing, people. Happiness is on you, not your partner. Your partner does not give you happiness like some sort of gift. Okay. Happiness is not something that is solely dependent on another person or thing. Happiness is within you and only you.
Yeah.
And I cannot emphasize that enough.
I'm going to shit on you. Ready? It should not be dependent on other people to a great degree. Yeah.
But your ability to be happy really is your responsibility and your role, not those around you. As hard as it is to conceptualize sometimes. Yeah. My partner being a constant asshole, that would get tiring.
Wait a minute. You mean other people don't have to change for my happiness? They don't have to walk on eggshells for me? Wait a second. I've learned in the last several years that other people have to change for my happiness, and I'm not responsible for it. What do you mean, Kim?
If people just brought me Ferraris every day, I would feel so much better.
Yeah. If you could just not be yourself, I would be much happier, because it makes me uncomfortable and I'm triggered.
Real.
You're responsible for my trigger. No.
But yeah, we've all been in that state.
Yeah.
If the other person, if I just had, if.
Yeah.
Happiness is on you. Yeah. Your happiness is yours to own and to hold, not your partners, not your mamas, not your kids.
And a good example of this is, so going back to the boundaries, deciding what relationships bring that joy for you. And a lot of times it's being around people who share those values with you that you can live out, finding a partner that you can be a team with for each other's happiness, but not dependent upon them bringing that for you. This has to be a joint effort in those things, but that's where the relationships can help.
Such a complicated topic. We think of it as simple, and it's really anything but simple. And my hope is that everyone can find that little bit of happiness in whatever way feels authentic for you. If it is that euphoria, highly emotive type of joy, great. If you're someone like me who's a little less emotive, but inside you're feeling happy, great. Try to find that joy, whatever that means for you, that activity, being around those people, being outside, grounding, whatever it is, find it.
Get an experience, schedule it.
You will push it off to the back burner, because we are programmed to think work, chores, housework, kids, everything else comes first, and then my needs. That cannot be the order, or you will be unhappy.
And we've talked about this in previous episodes, and I know we'll have an episode specifically on this, but this could be engaging in play in your relationship, your romantic relationship. Go having a board game. Find things that were so joyful for you two as a couple when you were playing, right?
I have friends in my space, and I know they wouldn't mind me sharing that they play cards every night as a couple. And I stinking love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's cute.
Right? Or going on a walk. Even if it's a family walk, right? If your kids are walking ahead of you, hold your partner's hand. Talk about the sunset.
If you feel comfortable with PDA, of course.
Yeah. It's just a handhold. But finding that play, finding that intimacy, that connection that gives us oxytocin, that gives us dopamine, so we can feel joy.
Yeah. One thing on a very brief level that I love doing is going outside, even if it's just outside in my place, is doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, so I can be present outside.
Will you remind everyone what that is?
Yeah. So 5 things I see, 4 things that I can physically feel. That could be the temperature, the breeze, the sun on my face, my clothes, contact, on my body, my feet on the ground. It could be something like that. 3 things I hear, right? The birds, or the wind in the trees, or children playing. 2 things I smell, hopefully good things. And then just, I typically, you can do taste for the 1, but I like to do a deep breath, and I do 4 seconds in the nose where I'm pushing my belly out on the inhale, and then I hold for 4, and then I exhale out my mouth for 8 seconds. And I might have to do that multiple times, or, like mindfulness, it's really designed to be more a la carte and choose what works for you. So there'll be a day where I'm just focusing on sounds, just to be in that moment. And again, this is where the mindfulness elicits positive emotions. So helping with the happiness.
I love that.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is huge. It's huge. Doing it with your partner. I tell partners, even at night when we do check-ins, not just highs and lows, but needs and appreciations.
I laugh because when my wife sees that I'm crabby, what are 5 things you see? And I'm like, ugh. And it works.
Get it, Taylor.
Yeah. So she does that, but yeah.
Well, this has been one of my favorite episodes because as therapists, as people who focus on relationships, we often get kind of entrenched in the challenges, the struggles, and we don't think about joy is just as much work, just as much intention, if not more, and how important and valuable it is.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for this conversation.
Yeah. And our job as therapists aren't just to, focus on the problem saturation. It's also to work on how do we make it happier, and that
do this part.
Yeah. And that might be to change the interactions a little bit so it can be more efficient. So that's less of a stress, which means less stress. You feel happier. And that's also a goal. Or the therapist holding you accountable to schedule play with your partner and prioritizing the relationship and those connections, which they're the first things to go when we're stressed. So
good. Well, this has been Relationships Inside Out, where we talk about all things relationships, including with yourself and your joy, but also your joy with other people. What does that look like? As always, if anyone has any questions or topic suggestions, feedback, feel free to email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com. And I look forward to chatting next week.